What's your homeowners association horror story? Hoa said there was a surplus of funds and sends out a survey to find out what people want the money spent on: swimming pool, basketball court, etc. A few months later we get a notice that they're raising the dues because they need more money to afford all the new amenities we requested. The entire board was voted out the following year. They sent us a series of nasty notices to remove the dead tree in our front yard. The tree had lost all of its leaves and it was unsightly, apparently. The catch is that they sent us this notice in November. You know, like fall, when perfectly healthy trees lose their leaves. We pretended we didn't understand which tree they were talking about until spring, when the tree magically came back to life. When we were privately renting in a townhome community, the dumpster had video surveillance so that the Hoa could fine anyone breaking the rules as far as what we were allowed to dump. One day both myself and So get a bitchy call from our property manager alerting us that Hoa has fined us $250 for illegal dumping. The property owner will have to pay it and we will have to reimburse him. After racking our brains about what we could have possibly thrown out that wasn't allowed, we decided to call up the Hoa to see if we could see the video. They would either transfer us to someone else that would hang up, or their hours would change to where no one would answer the phone, or they'd promise to get the video to us the next day, etc. This went on for about 2 weeks. Finally my So got to see the video while I was at work. I texted him to find out what was on it and he said the video was of a middle-aged Asian lady throwing out a bunch of furniture. It was the stupid property owner's freaking wife. Our Hoa hired a management company to run the day-to-day business. What that meant was a guy would ride around taking pictures of petty bullshit and mailing violations to homeowners. I had so many quarrels over nothing. Well, it turns out the Hoa didn't have any teeth behind the violations since the bylaws didn't allow fines. Somebody came up with the bright idea to start imposing fines to ensure compliance. That is when I ran for and won the vice presidency of the board. Another gentleman who was fed up with this crap ran and won as well. We didn't have the power to dissolve the Hoa, but we decided the next best thing was to paralyze it. Without us in attendance, the board could never reach quorum to conduct business. And they never did. When we rented, the Hoa would report to our property manager and then the property manager would call us to let us know what we'd done wrong. We were reported for so many things that had nothing to do with us. We got a call that we can't have a grill on our front porch. We didn't even own a grill. We got told that we are only permitted one car parked on the street. Our other 2 cars need to be parked in the garage. We only owned 1 car at that time. We got a call that neighbors were complaining that our dogs were barking all hours of the night. We didn't have dogs. This house didn't even have a yard. The weirdest is when our property manager calls and says, "You need to move the doormat that you have leaning against your house." Husband goes outside and finds a doormat leaning against the neighbor's house. But whoever reported it, wouldn't it have been easier to just knock on the door and say something? The entire 3 years we lived in this house, the neighbors across the street used their porch as storage. As homeowners, in a different neighborhood, we were written up for not taking Christmas lights down in a timely manner. It was mid-January and we'd been gone for my grandpa's funeral. So, we took them down right away as soon as we got the write-up. No warnings as is procedure, just straight to "here's a write-up, you need to go before the board where they'll decide if you have to pay a fine." I alerted them lights were removed. They got back to me saying we didn't remove all decorations. I had a snowman on the door that says "let it snow" and snowflakes in the window. Winter decorations, not Christmas. They were super snotty about it until I pointed out they'd broken their own procedure by not giving us warnings and that we felt targeted. They dropped it. A year and a half ago we redid our landscaping. The landscaper had pavers sitting in the front of the house, so it was obvious something was up. We got a letter in the mail telling us to cease and desist as we hadn't gotten Hoa approval to landscape our backyard. The letter included a photo. The angle of the photo clearly showed that whoever had taken it had gone into our backyard to take it. They are not allowed to do that. I emailed them, pointing this out. They dropped it. Not necessarily horror stories, but shows what a pain in the butt an Hoa can be. fined multiple times and threatened with a lien by the Hoa because we would not water our grass during a major drought season. It was cheaper and easier to fight the Hoa since the city and state passed regulations banning constant watering and green grass. The city had Google-like vans with cameras that'd be driving neighborhoods to catch violators and fine them. Super illegal. Hoa can't make any regulations requiring homeowners to break city/state/federal laws or regulations. Everyone in our neighborhood received fines for leaving garage cans at the road. It was trash day. When my brother first moved into his condo, quiet hours were 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sunday to Thursday, never really enforced. A couple years later 2 board members sold, 2 new came on board, one being a 60 years/old man. Quiet hours are now 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sunday to Thursday, 10 to 6 Friday to Saturday. The 60 years/old guy will knock on your door if he thinks you are too loud. It's a very young metro neighborhood. Loft complex. The old guy came to his door to complain a couple weeks ago BC he thought the pizza delivery guy was too loud. Pound on his door at 2 a.m. every night complaining that he's making too much noise. When he says he was sleeping, tell him he was screaming in his sleep. Don't let the man sleep until you have crushed him. My Hoa decided that my trim needed to be painted right now. Threatened a $100 a month fine if it wasn't. The trouble is that it was January, and I live near Chicago. As I was buying the paint, the salesperson keeps telling me that the paint won't dry, it will just freeze, and fall off within 6 months. I was selling in the spring anyway, so I didn't care. Painted the trim in a temperature of 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Frickers. When my family moved away from my family's ranch we went to a trailer park for a while, then into an actual house. We wound up in a neighborhood that had an Hoa. My dad refused to sign their contract because he is red-blooded, American, redneck. Everything was good until they tried to tell him how to manage his household. This happened in a place where you actually aren't obligated to obey the Hoa unless they have you on contract. We pissed them off because we refused to pay dues. This prompted the Hoa president to do everything they could to make us decide paying the dues was easier than dealing with their crap. They told him that we couldn't keep our cars in our driveway, they had to be in the garage. The problem is, we had my dad's car, mom's car, my car, and the work truck, but only a 2-car garage. But my father is a patient and accommodating man, so we moved our cars to the street. They tried to get onto him for that, so we parked in the front yard. They then tried to come at him with the contract and tell him to sell 2 of the vehicles. His response, I ain't signed shit. Get the hell off my property. And thus the war between the Hoa and house plague then began. My mom wanted a garden like we had back at the ranch, so my dad grabbed my brother and I and we went to Home Depot to get supplies. We come back and start doing the prep work and some guy comes up and asks what we're doing. Building a garden. I'm gonna put some raised boxes up with some shelves over by the door and line the rest of the front with flower beds. What do you think? The guy says he thinks it sounds alright and walks away. We get to work. 15 minutes later my mom comes out and says she had the Hoa president on the line. Dad tells her to tell the president to frick off. Next they come over to tell him he has to have landscaping projects approved by the Hoa. After a short argument my dad reverts to his military personality and yells, "Get off my property." At which point Mr. Hoa chose not to press the issue. We had lived there about 8 months and other things had happened, but this was the first time they called the police. We were packing up to go hunting. It was a Friday evening, and we put our rifles in the gun rack on the work truck and started moving back and forth from the house bringing all our gear and supplies. As we're going over the checklist one last time just to make sure, a police car pulls up and tells my dad they got a call about armed men robbing a house. My dad explains the situation and the officer goes to get in his car and leave when this lady, who turns out to be the Hoa press wife, they lived down the street a ways, comes out and asks the officer why he isn't doing anything. She insists that he can't just let us carry weapons around. She gets more and more upset as the officer explains that the weapons are safely stored for transport. It's our private residence, so we actually can carry them, and my father is licensed to carry anyways. At this point she is starting piss off my dad, who tells her, Linda, you are trespassing right now, and if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, stay the hell off my property. At which point the police officer told us all to calm down, and sent Mrs. Hoa back home and us on our way. A few more months go by. We've been there about a year and we're remodeling about half the house over the summer. They have called the police on us for nothing enough times that the police are actually on our side. We were working on a bathroom and pulled the toilet out and put it by the curb with the trash. The trash collectors came and took everything but the toilet. Fair is fair, it was definitely over the weight limit. We call the city and ask how to get rid of it, and basically we have to take it to the dump ourselves. We figure we'll get it when we take the copper and tile and get back to work. About an hour later there's a knock on the door. Dad opens it to none other than Mr. and Mrs. Hoa. They tell us we can't leave the toilet on the street. My dad tells them he understands, he'll move it when we're done working for the day. This is not good enough. They demand we move the toilet this instant. Okay, my dad says, and then has me help him move the toilet and position it as the centerpiece of our yard. He told them the toilet would stay there as long as he liked. This time there was no yelling, not even a command to get off his property. Only my 6 feet 4 inches bearded, construction worker father, laughing his ass off at these two as they lost their damn minds. When they left, he made an out of order sign for the toilet, took us for ice cream, and we were done working for the day. But wait. There's more. A few days later, I wake up to police sirens on the street. I get up and walk outside in my PJs to see what's going on, and I saw a sight that brings a smile to my face to this day. The police arresting Mr. and Mrs. Hoa for attempted theft of a toilet as my father, clad in dog tags, combat boots, boxers, and a bathrobe stolen from Motel 6, smokes a cigarette and laughs from atop his porcelain throne. TL Dr. My redneck father conducts a campaign of subversion against an a-hole Hoa president. Edit 1. Y'all wanted more stories about my dad, so here is how my dad met my mom. He's told me the story enough times that I have it memorized word for word. Me and your uncle was working a construction site when I got knocked over and touched a hot wire. Foreman calls the ambulance and they take me and James to the hospital. I get through triage and I'm sitting in the bed when this curly-haired redhead nurse walks in and gives me some kind of medication. And after she left I looked at James and said, man, I'd eat the corn out of her shit just to see where it came from. So your uncle says to me, he says, hell man, why didn't you say nothing? So I says to him, James, that's a damn fine idea. And I got up, hospital gown and all, go out into the hall to chase her down and ask if she would like to get some dinner when she got off shift. And that's how I asked your mom out on our first date. Edit 2, found a picture of the toilet. Not mine, but one of my good friends has a rather insane Hoa. They actually used rented surveying equipment to determine that his clothesline was 1 inch taller than his fence and fined him several $100s for some stupid structure beyond the fence rule they had. Same Hoa has someone walking around actually measuring the length of grass with a ruler and issuing warnings for mowing. Until a recent coup, our Hoa was run by some of the pettiest people alive. Some of their hijinks over the years included sending us a nasty letter telling us that we were in violation of their covenants due to bare places in our lawn. We were in the midst of totally replacing the sod in our yard as part of a landscaping plan the Hoa approved. Sending us a violation letter because the trash can had not been moved back inside until 10 minutes after the deadline, 6 p.m. on trash pickup day, because no one has a commute or an emergency or works different hours than the Hoa board members. This was sent with a time-stamped photo of the trash can. and my personal favorite, sending us a violation letter that we needed to replace our mailbox because it was damaged and we would be fined $25 a day until we did so. The mailbox was fairly new, so I went out to look at it. It was absolutely covered with bird poop. Cleaned it off and noticed that there was no damage. Shrugged and emailed the HOA that the problem was rectified. They came out to verify that it was, and I got another letter. More bird poop. A few hours of observation revealed that a hawk was perching on the mailbox stalking a chipmunk that was living in the garden around our mailbox. So I went to the garden store and got a bottle of Predator P stuff that scares away small animals and sprinkled it around the mailbox, causing the chipmunk to relocate. Problem solved. Sadly, I did not send the HOA an envelope full of the stuff. The fake HOA in our neighborhood. Started off as a neighborly gesture. Cheap $75.00 a year. Cleared the roads, some spring dumpsters, a summer barbecue. Then the bored housewife who had nothing better to do became president of the HOA. The elections, meetings, and of course raised the HOA fee 200%. She talked about new street signs, new roads, side walls, and gates into the entrance of the neighborhood. Mind you, our home was the original property back in the 1940s. I assume the owners sold off land for the homes around us. No common areas, neighborhood pool, park, trails, nothing. I refused to pay or be any part of the little HOA club. She called as I was past due on my HOA fees. I politely told her there is no HOA here, that is why we bought this home. She asked if we use the roads and I said yes, of course. Her response was, well, you need to pay to use my roads. I told her I do, it's called property tax. I asked her to never contact me again. Funny, some participate in the HOA. They just put in $15,000 worth of stop signs. We have 5 intersections. She wants to resurface the over 1 mile road now. Good luck with that. I'll gladly be the one they hate who hangs her laundry out to dry. Do not buy in an HOA. Oh, my good friend had a story. Her and the husband moved into this gated community. She loves having a bird bath in her backyard and she gardens a lot, so the decoration makes sense. Turns out her HOA figured out that she had said bird bath in her backyard. Apparently bird bath equals lawn ornament, which was forbidden. She told them she would remove it. A week later she gets another message saying that it hasn't been removed. It wasn't. Obviously her and the husband put it together that the HOA is snooping in her backyard. For a week, she spends her time outside sunbathing in the nude, setting her trap. Sure enough, an HOA narc opens the gate to their backyard and sees her in the nude. Instant call to the police for privacy violations. The HOA gave up and let her have a bird bath. She is now on the board of the HOA and they leave her alone. My mother died in September of 2016. My disabled father went into the hospital and then long-term rehab until the present. The house was in my mom's name and their neighbor across the street is the treasurer of the HOA. He knew my mom died of cancer within a year of her diagnosis and that my dad was in the hospital. He billed my dead mother for a year, and when the bills were unpaid, he took it to court to begin foreclosure proceedings. At this point, I received a certified letter and contacted a lawyer to help. It was originally $1,700, but increased to $4,200 with late fees and attorney fees. Our lawyer is confident we can settle for far less than $4,200. Edit. Thank you for all of the kind words and encouragement. I wanted to do some type of harm or vandalism, but that would not be good for my dad and I have too much to lose. As for sending notice, it was an automatic type of withdrawal that my mom took care of when she was alive and cancer-free. I was naive and should have been on top of it, but I was taking care of my dad, grieving for my mom, and being a father/husband. When I went to the HOA to pay the fees, they told me I could only contact their attorneys, so I couldn't go in that direction. I would love to provide you more specifics, but legally that would not be advisable. My attorney is very confident that this will end well for us. Thank you for the encouragement.